What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the draft analysis for the UPBA. It is finally here. We are playing Gen 8 Draft League. What a freaking ride, huh? So I've been doing Draft League tutorials and analysis for the past few months now, and I'm excited to jump back into some YouTube upload required content. I want to thank some people who helped me draft this team, as well as people who are involved with the league. First off, I assembled a front office which is going to help me for both this league and the other Wi-Fi league that I'm partaking in. Yes, I'm partaking in too. The people who are in that Wi-Fi or in that front office are Vepsis, Sean, aka Blind Messiah, Simi Chris, Platinum Howler, Vinny, Simon, and that should be it. So thank you to those people for helping me draft this team and my UBL team, which you'll see coming up in hopefully a few weeks, but that's still a while away from when I'm going to be starting the UPBA upload. So this is going to come first, and then UBL will follow a few weeks later. That being said, stay updated for both content. It'll be two different draft teams for two different leagues, and I'm super excited to be sort of kicking it off strong on a Sword and Shield Wi-Fi craze. I'm super excited. I'm really excited to be starting to play against new opponents, join new communities, and try new mons and try a new way to play Pokemon. I hope you enjoy. I'm going to try and enjoy myself, and I'm excited for you all to come along. So the way the UPBA draft works is that you are allowed to draft between 10 and 12 Pokemon, and you had a certain budget of, I think, about 120 points. I could be wrong about the total budget total, but either way, it was, you had a certain budget in order to draft 10 to 12 mods. You'll see the budget that I had left in my top right corner. And I'm just going to go through pick by pick what I picked. I was the 7th overall pick in a pool of 20 people, which means there were going to be a lot of snipes. And since I was in the middle, I wasn't going to be able to plan certain mons together. I always had to plan one at a time. So it was very risky. It was very difficult, but I'm pretty proud of what I came out with. So there was a lot of chaos. I'll try and go through that as well. But without further ado, there we go. Let's see our draft. And for the first pick of the UPBA, I am picking up Mew, a Pokemon that I am extremely comfortable with, something that has a ridiculously diverse move pool, and something that I am stunned fell all the way down to me in pick 7. So 6 other mons went for Mew, and I was stunned because I genuinely do think, I'm not sure about Galar but I honestly think in Showdown, Wi-Fi League's Mew is, in my mind, one of the best Pokemon in draft format. So I'm really excited I got my hand on it, and it's super fun to play with. Has a ton of different coverage options, has coverage for every single typing, Stealth Rocks, all statuses, Defog, ton of setup opportunities, can use virtually any item, can be a Stall Breaker, can be a Tauntmon, can be a Bulkymon, can be a Stallmon, can be a pivoting mon. It can literally be anything. It can be Scarf, it can be Nasty Plot. I don't even know what to say about it because there's so many things that it can do. The reason I wanted to draft Mew so early is, one, because I thought that a 100 speed tier to cut me off right at like a decent spot for speed was really, really good. But I also wanted to have a mon that I had a lot of flexibility with, right? I wanted to have a mon that wasn't going to be one-dimensional, and it allowed me to build the rest of my team almost on top of Mew, if that makes sense. So I can draft Mew, and then I can build a separate offensive core and a separate defensive core, and then Mew can just fit its way in it however it needs to be. So that's my goal for the rest of this draft. I have Mew drafted. Now I'm going to try and make an offensive set of mons, and I'm going to try and make a defensive set of mons. And I'll be allowed to sort of pick and choose between those two, and then fit Mew how I feel during my building process. So that's sort of the idea behind Mew. Really excited to use it. I used it in BBR Season 1 pretty successfully. I was top in the league before playoffs started with it, so it's Mew. I'm pretty good with Mew, and I'm excited to be using it. And for the second pick of the UPBA, we are going to be getting Terrakion, something that I've never used before and something that I am truthfully still a little terrified to use. The reason I wanted to get Terrakion is because I wanted something to break those darks that Mew struggles with. And I wanted to sort of kickstart my offensive mons that I wanted to get. I want to make sure I had one semi-speedy offensive mon, so I wasn't sort of scrounging at the bottom to find one. So that's what Terrakion's there for. It's a Stealth Rocker as well, even though I doubt I'll bring it very often, but it does take a little bit of pressure off Mew to set up Stealth Rocks. I have a lot of Stealth Rockers down the line and Hazard Setters, so you'll be able to see those as well. Other thing about Terrakion, like I said, is it does break darks. It also switches into knockoffs sometimes. I don't want to lose my item very often, but that being said, it's something that at least threatens mons from going for dark moves, maybe even like a dark pulse from a special Pokemon. So that's always nice with Mew, and it's really cool to have a mon that sort of breaks the things that Mew struggles with. So another thing that Mew could struggle with are like flying types with U-turn. That's something that Terrakion can sort of capitalize on a little bit. Also a super reliable Scarfer, super reliable Bandmon, super reliable Setup Sweeper, and Win Condition, which is nice. If I don't want to make Mew a Win Condition with like Dragon Dancer, Nasty Plot, I can make Terrakion like a Weakness Policy, Rock Polish, or like a Scarf Cleaner Win Condition in building. So that's really cool, and I'm really excited to be using Terrakion. For my third pick, I dipped really low. There were still a lot of people getting 13 pointers, 14 pointers, something around there, but I felt like I needed to get a fairy type ASAP. And the fact is when I talk about taking burdens and pressures off of Mew, it means that I need to make sure I have defensive Pokemon that can do roles that Mew can also do, so that Mew isn't forced to do those roles, if that makes any sense. So, for example, Mew really is a nice response to like fighting types. Like we think about Mienshao, we think about Conkeldurr, like those are something that like Mew could come in and switch in against. I don't necessarily want Mew to do that, especially if I want to be bringing it offensively occasionally. So I wanted to make sure I had another mon that defogged and hazard stacked so that that pressure wasn't on Mew. And I wanted a mon that resisted fighting pretty effectively. So Galarian Weezing fit the bill. It checked off of fairy type, and fairy types were going very quick. And I'm glad I picked it up when I did, because it would have been sniped had I waited a little bit longer. So I think it was a very good pick. It gives me another defogger on top of Mew, which is perfect. It gives me a T-Spiker. And I really like its diversity. I've never used Galarian Weezing, but I've used regular Weezing, and being able to switch between Levitate and Neutralizing Gas, and your opponent not knowing which one you are, can create some pretty good mind games in the back that could allow you to, play some mind games with them and sort of confuse them a little bit with what ability you bring. The other thing I'll say about it is that it's a status spreader. It goes for things like Willow. That's something that Mew occasionally wants to do. So having something like that with Weezing, it also gets Thunderwave, is equally pretty valuable to me. So it was at this point that I wanted to pick up my Steel type, but I started to see that a lot of the bulky waters were running low. My original pick was Suicune because it's something I've had a lot of experience with and I'm very comfortable with using. That being said, it was taken by Jack, aka Gravy, aka the commissioner of the league, before I had an opportunity to pick it up. So I got Milotic. It's something I've only used extremely briefly in a tournament where I've only gotten to play 2 games with it so far. I'm actually playing my 3rd game with it tonight, but at least the night that this is being recorded, which is like 2 weeks before this is going to go out. But either way, it's very neat. It gives me another pivot, which I don't have yet with Flip Turn. That being said, I think it's just more important to have a bulky water that can recover, go for Scald, get burns, Toxic Spread, things like that. It just adds on to my offense, or adds on to my defense rather, between Weezing and Milotic. And I'm going to add another defensive mon to this team right afterwards so that I just have all of that patched right away. And every single typing is covered with the exception of, I think, one, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But Milotic just is very good in general because it comes in against things like water types, which I didn't have a resistance to, like offensive water types, and, other things like fire types as well, which Terrakion doesn't necessarily want to switch in on. So I think a really great pickup for me. Fits my team really well. And in hindsight, I think I would have picked up Suicune had I had the 2 options, but in hindsight, I'm glad I picked up Milotic instead of Suicune because I think having the recovery is really nice for me, especially when Weezing doesn't have reliable recovery outside Pain Split, so having a Pokemon that does is pretty nice. Adding on to our pretty gross defense, we have a Registeel here, which is something I have only gotten to recently try out as well, similar to Milotic, and another Pokemon that doesn't necessarily get recovery, but something that can sit in front of opponents for a long time if not handled properly. It's another Rocker, which I don't have yet outside of Terrakion and Mew, neither of which reliably want to set up rocks, and another status spreader that can spread things like T-Wave and Toxic, which once again are things that Mew wants pressure taken off of doing. It does actually run a pretty mean body press set, which I think is something that could be a necessary win condition in certain circumstances. For that reason, I made sure that I was going to pick up other rock setters down the line in the draft so that, or rocks or other hazard setters down the line in the draft, so that I wasn't forced to bring rocks on this every week. So you'll see that as it comes on. But between Weezing, Milotic, and Registeel, I cover virtually every single typing, assuming Weezing has Levitate to cover ground types. The only type I don't really cover right now is electric, I'm pretty sure. There could be one more or two more that I'm missing, like ghost type. It might be electric and ghost are the two I'm thinking of, things that the 3 don't necessarily cover. So that's something we have to figure out down the line, and something that actually my 6th pick works very, very well with. And for the 6th pick, I picked up Diggersby. There was really no bigger logic behind this other than I needed a ground, and ground types were going very quickly. I was pretty ghost weak, I didn't have a resist yet, and I was pretty electric weak, I didn't have a resist yet for that either. So Diggersby just sort of seemed like a natural option. Now there is a few downsides to picking up Diggersby in that it can be pretty similar to Terrakion. It can be sort of a setup cleaner. They're both physical breakers, and they both share a lot of weaknesses. So that is and can be a concern, and something that I will have to work my way around. That being said, I don't think it's going to necessarily hinder me, because I think the ability for Diggersby to pivot potentially into something like Terrakion could be good in certain circumstances. Diggersby also gives me priority, which is something that I don't have yet, except with like Sucker Punch or Vacuum Wave Mew, which isn't going to come that often. Other than that, I just think it's a really great mon. Another sort of agility speed boosting sweeper, so that burden's not on Terrakion if I have to run a Scarf set. And I like this because if I feel like I have to run Scarf Diggersby, I can run like a setup Terrakion. And if I feel like I need to run like a Scarf Terrakion, I could run like a setup Diggersby. So they're not necessarily interchangeable. Like I could bring non-Scarf on both in some particular week, but you never know. It's just nice to have that flexibility, not be forced within one particular Swords Dance mon, or one particular speed boosting sweeper mon, or one particular Scarfer. It's good to have sort of a multitude of them to be able to pick and choose and prep, which is very good for me on my team. Pick number 7 has a little bit of backstory to it. I know some people who are pretty commonly experienced in Draft League might be thinking to themselves, how the hell did Rotom-Heat sort of last this low? The real answer is that it didn't. If it did, I probably would have picked it up round 4 or round 5. But my friend Galarian, who is also in this league, who I play, I think, like week 9, which is very cool, ended up drafting Rotom like pick 2, and later decided he didn't want to use it because he opted to take a sort of rain route with his draft, and decided that Rotom-Heat would not fit that role for him. So he offered to trade it to me, and he did. So I was able to get it at a pretty nice bargain, given I got it at pick 7, and it synergizes ridiculously well with my team. Like, it is insane how well Rotom-Heat synergizes with my team, because it gives me so many things I was looking for. It gives me a ground resist that's not a levitate, that's not Weezing, which could sometimes run neutralizing gas. Obviously Rotom is levitate, but it gives me a pivoter. It gives me a lot of key resistances that I didn't have so far, and sort of patches up other weaknesses that I had too. So it's just so good to add on to my defensive core. But that being said, it can be used offensively too, and as a special breaker. One of the biggest criticisms with my team that you'll see at the very end is that some people might say it lacks special breakers, but with Nasty Plot, I'd argue that Rotom-Heat can fill that role for me. So we'll see, how it goes with it. But I think that I think from my perspective, Rotom-Heat does offer immediate power, and if it doesn't, it offers perfect sort of pivoting options into certain other mons that I have. For example, being able to like volt switch on grass types into something like Galarian Weezing, or one of my mons that I draft a little bit later, will be extremely valuable for me. So I'm excited to use it. I've actually never gotten to use it before because it's always gotten taken from me every time I want to draft it. So another mod that I haven't used before and really am excited to use for the first time. It just synergizes so damn well with my team. It's insane that I got this, because if I didn't, I would be kind of in deep shit right now. Round 8 is where this draft starts getting really fun. I was originally planning some other grass types to pick up, something a little low tier potentially, because I was originally planning on getting something called Kyurem. But when Kyurem, one, Kyurem was sniped, and 2, once Rotom-Heat was offered to me, I slowly realized that I wouldn't have the points to afford Kyurem. So I ultimately decided Rotom-Heat was more valuable for my team given the resistances and sort of defensive positioning that it offered me. So I took the Rotom-Heat, and I decided, because I had those spare points in my plan, in that I went Rotom-Heat instead of Kyurem, I would be able to sort of not take as low tier of something like a grass type, for example. So I ended up picking up Vileplume, something that I've actually ironically not used in Gen 8 yet, but something that I am extremely well versed in using, something that I feel extremely comfortable with, and is obviously the team mascot. So I could not pass it up. I really love Vileplume to death, and I honestly am so excited to be using it again. It's something that works so well offensively, but also so brutally defensively. The fact that Vileplume can basically sit in front of a ton of physical attackers, even with like super effective coverage, is crazy to me, because if something is doing a ton of damage to it, and then you strength sap it back up, it's doing less damage afterwards, and you just keep strength sapping. So I think it's really great. It also gives me stuff like sleep spread, which I think is kind of cool, and it also just like spreads poison, and it sort of switches into water type attacks, which right now I only have Milotic for. I really love Vileplume a lot. With Effect Spore too, I just have a lot of status spread on this team, which I'm super excited to be sort of abusing against my opponents. Love Vileplume to death. I'm even from just like a favorite Pokemon perspective, I'm so excited to be using it. So round 9 is a little bit awkward because I wanted to get Noivern, but Noivern was picked pretty early. I wasn't able to pick it up, and I had to sort of compensate later on because I didn't want to like change up my plan too much. Additionally, I was getting really ground weak in that I guess Rotom-Heat and Weezing are resists, but you know, Weezing sometimes isn't, and the fact that, you know, Rotom-Heat already has a lot of pressure on it already means that it's not going to be my only ground resistance in this draft. So I ended up picking up a Talonflame. Now I know it's kind of weird with Rotom-Heat, but I would argue that Talonflame is really not much of a fire type and a ton of a flying type, so I'm not too concerned about doubling up on the fire types in general. I also think that they could work well together in the sense that, like, I don't know, like Rotom-Heat does break, like, I don't know, water types, which Talonflame could like struggle with, like bulky waters. So it's really good to have, but it's really just to patch that speed tier because Terrakion is my fastest mon right now, and that does need to change. So Talonflame works very well here. It works as another pivoter. It works also as a priority mon once, assuming I'm running Brave Bird with Gale Wings. But other than that, it doesn't really do much to the team other than give me a fast mon, offensive flying, which I didn't yet have, a pivoter, I guess another defogger, except I'm definitely not going to be using it as that. But I do like it because it is another sort of mon that can be part of the bulky side of my team builds, but can also be as part of the offensive side of my team builds if I want to run something like Choice Band, which I've done before. Talonflame is another mon that I have a lot of experience using, so even though it's sort of regarded as not too great of a bird, it's something that I personally feel comfortable with, and for my first Wi-Fi League, I definitely do want mons that I'm comfortable with. So especially when I already have things like you know, Weezing and Terrakion that I've never used before, even Rotom-Heat I've never used before. I do want things like Vileplume and Talonflame just as a little bit of like a homier feel for mons that I'm, you know, have experience using. So picked up Talonflame. There was literally nothing else in the speed tier that fit my team. I guess there was Salazzle, but once again, I had a pretty big ground weakness, so I didn't want to exacerbate that. Next up on your screen, you can see Wigglytuff, the round 10 pick. I wanted Wigglytuff because I did not yet have a normal type, and I also thought that a Wish Passer would be pretty good for my team, given I have things like Registeel and Galarian Weezing. Even if it's low tier, just the threat of being able to wish back up and such is pretty good for me. I also, like I said around Registeel, is I did want one more rocker on this team, so Wigglytuff does offer that to me. There's other things like Ghost going around that I just want to make sure I was able to patch, because right now my Ghost resist is, I only have Diggersby, and Diggersby doesn't want to take certain hits, so I do think I needed one more Ghost answer. I actually have one more after this, which I'm extremely excited about. But Wigglytuff I've never used before. It gives me rocks. It gives me a Wish Passer, which I think is very valuable. It gives me Heal Bell, but you know, obviously I have a few other clerics, but you know, it's another option. It also is pretty offensive. I have faced it before in low tier leagues and seen that competitive or just Life Orb in general with its vast amount of coverage is super cool. The other thing that I really like about it is its ability to work as a slow pivot. I do like the fact that Wigglytuff can slow pivot on the, say, steel types coming in against it or fire types coming in against it, and Terrakion can just blow those back after I go for a teleport. So really nice momentum on my team as well. For round 11, we are getting, yes, Guzzlord, the best fucking Ultra Beast of all time. You have seen Guzzlord probably more often on my channel than you'll see on any other Draft League YouTube channel, because I genuinely believe I use Guzzlord better than most people. That's not me trying to, like, brag, but it's just one of those mons that I think if there's one mon that, like, no one really uses, but I use, and I feel like I use it well, it's Guzzlord. And that's because I have never lost a game using Guzzlord, first of all. Every time I brought Guzzlord, I've never lost a game with it. So it's kind of a good luck charm. I think it's like 13-0 in games I've brought it with in my entire, like, career, if that matters. Also gives me a dark type, also gives me a dragon type, didn't have any of those, and it gives me another ghost resist, which I find really handy. It does patch up other things that I felt sort of weak to, like offensive water types, and offensive electric types, and offensive fire types. Gives me switch-ins to those mons if need be. Like I said, it's something I'm very familiar with. And the other thing, too, is I don't have a ton of knockoff mons right now. I mean, I have Diggersby, I have Mew, I guess I have Wigglytuff, and now I have Guzzlord. So I wanted another knockoff mon because I felt like I was kind of missing some. I'm really comfortable with knocking off items as part of like my game strategy. I like doing that. So I figured it would be good to have a mon that, well, did that. So I'm really excited to be using Guzzlord again. I can only think of one time I've ever used my two favorite Pokemon, Vileplume and Guzzlord, on the same draft, and it was in a tournament for like 2 weeks. So being able to do it a little bit more extensively on a Wi-Fi league, nonetheless, is extremely exciting for me as someone who loves both those mons. For my final pick, I was super unsure what to do. I wanted to originally get something like Mr. Rhyme, which, even though it doubled up on psychic types, it gave me another spinner and gave me an ice type, which I didn't have. That being said, it was taken, sadly, so I ended up looking very hard and wasn't like super sold on anything that was 5 points. But I ultimately thought about it, and I talked to Platinum Howler about it, and Howler suggested I get Drifblim, because something that I hadn't really clicked in my mind is that I do have terrain with Galarian Weezing and Misty Surge, so I can do some unburdened shenanigans if I feel like I need to in a certain matchup. And having that sort of option on top of like already what I feel like is a very cool team that I'm comfortable with is like super nice. Just having that like fail save in the case of like a bad matchup or just a team that's really weak to Ghost could be really cool. It gives me a little bit nicer speed control as well with the unburdened stuff. Particularly because my team is not extremely fast right now. You know, I got Talonflame and then Terrakion and then Mew. Not the best speed tiers of all time, but I do think that Unburdened Drifblim may hedge back against that a little bit. I did think it was a little bit overpriced, but I didn't see anything else that I really wanted on my team. And it actually does give me things that I didn't necessarily have before. It gives me another ground resist, which is super nice, even though I don't have any resists, actually. I only have immunities, but either way, it's still pretty cool. Gives me another status spreader, which is a good theme for my team. It gives me a defogger. It gives me a knockoff mon, all things that I was looking for. So really excited to be trying it out, something I've never used and something I've never even thought of using because I never really regarded it in some like great light. I just never felt like it would fit on a team ever, and I know it's a mon you don't really think about. So it's gonna be super exciting to try it. I'm gonna try and bring it, you know, when I can. So it's gonna be really cool to see how it does. And with that, those are my 12 mons on my team. I'm super excited to be playing this season. Once again, thank you to Jack for inviting me to this league. I'm super excited. Week 1, we're gonna go up against someone named Slightly Salty, someone I've never met before. A lot of these people I've never met before, but someone who does look to be a pretty good battler and has a pretty scary team. So look forward to that. I'm very excited to be using this team in the future, and be sure to stay tuned for the Wi-Fi battles. I'm excited to be playing them, and I'm excited for y'all to be watching them. All right, see y'all around.